Hey guys, Technomentary here with the video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the iPhone SE 2020 edition or the second edition versus the iPhone XS or the XS. In this video, we're going to break down the big differences between these two powerful devices. We're going to talk about the hardware, the software, and then the overall performance on iOS 14 and what we noticed between these two devices. And can I answer the question for you guys? Well, if you're looking to upgrade from one to another, or if you're choosing between these two devices, which one might be a better option? And in this video, we're going to break all of that down. But before we go ahead and get started, if you guys are new to our channel and haven't subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we do a lot of tech news reviews and giveaways. And also, if you guys are in the market to buy a cheap discounted iPhone, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section. We're hooking you guys up with some really good discounted iPhones. So let's go ahead and get started with today's review of these two iPhones. So the iPhone SE we have here came out in 2020 around the A4 time frame, and the iPhone XS came out in 2018, the September time frame, around the annual Apple releases. So about almost 2 years, a little less than 2 years, maybe 1.5 year difference between these two devices, but there is a lot of difference between the devices. First thing we want to take a look at is the phone device size. As you can see in my hand, the iPhone SE, much lighter, smaller, versus the iPhone XS, which is a little bit heavier, bigger, of course. And you'll notice the big difference between these two devices. Of course, these phones come in different size and color as well. The iPhone SE here comes in your product red edition, which is a unique edition I have in my hand. There's also the black and the white one as well, where the iPhone XS does come in a couple other colors. It comes in your silver one, and of course, as you can see here, I have the gold one as well. And of course, you have the difference between the color, of course. But besides the color, the other noticeable difference, of course, we'll talk a little bit more in later on in the video, is of course the camera. As you can see, 1 megapixel for the iPhone SE versus the dual on the XS here. And of course, other physical differences you see is this noticeable difference in terms of where the Apple logos are and the size comparison between these two phones. And the other thing we want to talk about is the body. So both of the phone does have both front and back glass all to it, as you can see here, but the body is a little slightly different. Apple classifies as aerospace grade material for the iPhone SE versus the iPhone XS, which is surgical grade aluminum body. So slight terminology difference. To us, it looks about the same. Because both of them does have that glass back, it does allow you to wirelessly charge between these two devices. And let's talk about the other piece around the phone, about the hardware. As you can see here, when we hold it side by side, you almost see the comparison difference that we mentioned here. Their body, the bezels look a little bit different in terms that iPhone XS here is a little bit more shinier, where the iPhone SE is more of a matte color. But then if we look at the speaker, both of them does have stereo grade speaker on the bottom here and the charge port, and then of course on the side with the SIM card here. As you can see, about pretty much the same goes on both of these phones. And let's go and talk about the actual display of these phones, which is probably the big area difference between these two phones. Is you're going to notice sort of the size and also the design of both of these phones. The iPhone SE has that body with the Touch ID, where the iPhone XS does have that Face ID to it and that top bezel. So of course that makes a big difference in terms of screen size and the display itself. And a lot to discuss around the display itself that we want to talk about. The iPhone XS has that 5.8 all screen OLED display. That's a Super Retina display, where the iPhone SE here has a 4.7. It's a widescreen LCD display with IPS technology. Right off the bat, there's a big difference between OLED versus your LCD technology, and hence why the price point between these two phones are vastly different in terms of their starting price. The iPhone XS started at that $999 for a 64 gig based model, where the iPhone SE started at $399 for its price point. So big difference, huge price point difference. And if you're looking at more storage, the iPhone XS does go up to 512 gig, but the iPhone SE only goes up to 256 gig. And in their mid-range, you're gonna find that iPhone XS goes up to 256 gig, which the iPhone SE here goes up to 128 gigs. So those are the price in terms of the storage, which bumps up the price depending on what you're looking to. For each storage bump, you're paying $100 or more. But nonetheless, the iPhone XS is much more expensive, is the point that we're trying to make, because of that OLED all display. The other thing we want to talk about, the difference between OLED versus the LCD, is that resolution. So the iPhone XS gives you that 24 by 36 and 1125 pixel display versus the LCD, which gives you the 1334 by 750 pixel resolution in depth to it. The other noticeable difference we want to compare is the actual contrast ratio between that. So the iPhone SE here has a 14:1 contrast ratio versus the iPhone XS, which has a 1,000,000:1 ratio. So big difference in terms of their contrast as well. And other than that, of course, both of these phones have about the same amount of brightness to it. So you're not going to notice much difference in terms of that, because both of them do have that 625 nit max brightness to both of these phones. And let's go talk about the actual chip between these two devices. Both of them does have really powerful chip, but the chip itself is what's another differentiating factor for both of these phones. The iPhone XS has the A12 Bionic chip, and the iPhone SE here has that A13. And when Apple released the iPhone SE, it mentioned that that is the most powerful chip on any smart devices that Apple has tested at the time of it. But head-to-head comparison, is there much difference between these phones? Well, we see the iPhone SE actually has around 9% more in terms of CPU power computing versus the iPhone XS when you're doing some speed test and comparison between it. The other noticeable thing that Apple doesn't advertise is actually the RAM between these two phones. The iPhone XS has a 4 gig RAM versus the iPhone SE, which has a 3 gig RAM. So you're getting 1 gig more, and that really, when you start to game heavily on graphic heavy intensive game, where you notice that difference. Let's talk about the battery life of these two phones. So what kind of battery life can you expect out of these two phones? Well, there's a couple things here you're going to be expecting out of these phones. Is that the iPhone XS does have a bigger battery, but no surprise, because it's a bigger phone, it costs more. You're going to have a bigger battery. It has around 2600 mAh versus the iPhone SE, which has around 1800 mAh. Well, because these phones are big, what does that really mean for the battery life? Well, when we talk about battery life, one thing we want to talk about is the actual video playback between these two devices. That really determines what kind of battery life you're going to get. The iPhone XS gives you 13 hours versus the iPhone SE, which gives you 12 hours. 13. So the iPhone SE actually gives you 14 versus the iPhone SE here, that gives you 13 hours. So 13, 14, 1 hour difference. Are you going to really notice it? Probably not, depending on your use. For the most part, these phones will get you throughout the day without much issue overall. Let's talk about the next piece that we really want to talk about, is the camera. Is there any difference between the camera? Of course, physically, we've seen in the beginning of the video is that you have the dual megapixel camera versus is that one single 12 megapixel camera. And then the front side of the camera, both of them does have that 7 megapixel camera to it. Of course, that hasn't changed much, and that goes to show that both of these cameras can actually record phenomenal pictures. And of course, both of them does have your portrait portrait mode as well. So you're not missing out much in terms of what you're getting between these two phones. So they do record, they do take photos exceptionally well. Of course, the iPhone SE does have that 2x optical zoom, which isn't available on the SE here. And if you're talking about video recording, both of the phones does record about the same. You start from 720 HD to 4K 60 frames per second. So in recording, of course, the only difference here is optical zoom versus not having that optical zoom on it. And let's talk about the next part about these phones is the software aspect of both of these phones. So both of these phones, you're able to upgrade to iOS 14. Even in 2021, as you can see, we upgraded to iOS 14 with all the icons and such. And between testing both of these phones on, different gaming, different video streaming, Netflix, productivity tools, we haven't noticed really any difference between these two phones in terms of it. Of course, one thing is that display size. So when you're watching Netflix on the iPhone SE or YouTube video, it looks really tiny compared to that full all-body screen, which gives you a lot more real estate to work with. Even for social media, you're not going to notice all the popular apps are up to date, running. iOS 14 works phenomenal on both of these devices. We even did some video tests on iOS 14. Once we have upgraded, we haven't noticed any impact in terms of the overall performance. Both of these phones have the hardware to support iOS 14, no doubt about that. So if you're thinking of upgrading between these devices, go ahead and do that upgrade, since that upgrade itself, from our experience so far, it's been good, no issues there. So go ahead and do the upgrade. And let's talk about the overall performance of these phones in terms of the actual functionality and usage of these phones. So these phones come down to pretty much in terms of how much you're looking to spend in when you're looking to compare it. At this point around, if you're looking to buy pre-owned iPhone XS, you're going to pay about the same if you're looking to buy a brand new SE, because the price of the XS went down. It's about almost over 2 years since it's been released, and iPhone, as you know, 11 and 12 came out, so Apple did drop the price around the same point that you can get a new iPhone SE 2020 edition. So let's really talk about what are the advantages between these two phones that you might expect if you're looking to go from one to another. So let's talk about why the iPhone XS is better than the iPhone SE. The iPhone XS is better in that it has around 45% more battery power to it because of that 2600 versus that 1800 mAh. But we saw that in video playback, that doesn't really make much difference. Of course, the iPhone XS does have better camera because of that dual camera. It does have 1 gig more RAM to it, so more power for your basic computing or heavy graphic gaming as well. And that 2x on that camera, we have that optical zoom as well to it. And if you're looking to max out on your storage, you're going to have to go with the XS because it gives you that 512 gig max storage versus that 256. That's the mid grade for the iPhone XS. And why would you want to get the iPhone SE over the iPhone XS? Well, a couple reasons here is that you have a better CPU on the iPhone XS. We mentioned it has around 9%, a little over 9% faster CPU speed. Of course, if you like the feel of having a home button, it's something you're going to want, or if you miss that home button, you're going to want to stick to probably having this iPhone SE as well. And the other thing you will notice, of course, if you have really small hands, the iPhone SE is really nice and firm to have on your home. It's actually 29 gram lighter than the iPhone XS as well. Just allows you to shoot raw video. When it comes to camera, of course, the iPhone XS does have a better camera. So overall, it really does come down to what are your basic needs for an iPhone. Both of the phones will get you throughout the day doing your basic calling, your texting without any issues. Browsing wise, you can browse between them without really any issue. So it's a question of how much are you spending. We would recommend, probably if you're really looking for a phone with a lot of features, the iPhone XS, since the price is about the same, does give you a lot of features. Both of the phones are going to be supported for at least another 2 to 3 years, no doubt. You're going to get the major upgrade of the iOS. The one thing you're going to get out of the iPhone SE is that it will get probably a year more out of it than the iPhone XS here. But nonetheless, both of the phones will be supported for a very long time, no doubt at all. So hopefully this video was helpful in doing a review for you guys on the iPhone SE versus iPhone X. If this video was helpful, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. But also, we want to hear from you guys. If you guys are using either of the devices, what do you guys think? Any comments? Leave it in the comment section. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.